Welcome to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers Podcast. Each episode will bring you conversations from business leaders and up-and-coming stars in the commercial real estate industry in Canada. Our guests will share their unique career journeys, passions, and advice on what it takes to be successful in this industry. This podcast is brought to you by Highview Partners, connecting people who perform in Canadian real estate.
I'm your host, Richard Costello, and today I'm pleased to introduce David Basche. David is the President of Astria Properties in Langley, BC, and is focused on the strategic growth of this young organisation, overseeing the company's day-to-day operations. Prior to forming Astria in May 2022, alongside his business partner Josh Gagladi, David spent a decade specialising in development and acquisitions for one of Vancouver's leading real estate developers, Bosa Properties. In our conversation today, we'll learn more about David's background, how real estate became his passion, reasons behind his success. We'll dig into his motivation for starting a business and reflections on how this new chapter is going so far. We'll chat more about Astria and David's thoughts on the market and opportunities ahead, before turning to David's advice for aspiring real estate professionals. First of all, thank you for joining me today, David. It's really great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I've really been looking forward to sharing some of my insight on the industry with you.
Amazing. Well, it might take listeners a few minutes to pick up on it, but I know this. You've got the slightest of accents, and you, like me, grew up elsewhere. So what do you mind telling us about your background and early days?
You're definitely right in spotting that sometimes my accent is a little thicker than other times, so it can make for some conversations. But I was actually born and raised in Germany, and I spent the greater part of my childhood in a city called Cologne. And then in my as I turned 16, I made a move over to Canada to finish high school on Vancouver Island and proceed to university. It was kind of a move that my family and I had always discussed, and I thought it was a pretty great opportunity to experience something a little different than just growing up in one city. When I was going through the schooling system in Germany as a younger child, I actually had some troubles in school, and I think I was just a late starter. I had to do an honor round, how I always call it. I repeated grade 6. And so from there on, things kind of started rolling for me, and then I made the move over to Canada. And the rest is history. I love this place, and I feel very fortunate to be living in Vancouver, which is just an incredible place to start a career, to raise a family, and just to live.
Fantastic. So did you move over with your parents, or did they kick you out and you came on your own?
I actually did not know. The idea was for the family to follow, but they didn't. So I spent probably about 15 years here by myself.
Okay.
Just going through high school, I went to go to boarding school, finish that, and then proceeded on with my education at UBC and BCIT, and then obviously proceeded to go work in the real estate industry.
Yeah.
It was tough at times, but I think being really independent from a young age has taught me a lot about life. So I look back, and as much as I didn't have the growing up with my family and doing the dinners and the lunches together and being around my family often, it taught me a lot of good things and a lot of good values about life that, I practice in today's business world, and I also try to, I guess, pass on to my younger son.
I'm curious, how would you have known about Vancouver Island living in Cologne in Germany? How did that even come on the radar?
Yeah. You'd be surprised. There's a fairly sizable German community all over Vancouver, and we actually had friends whose kids went to the boarding school on the island that I went to. And so when I came out here, I toured a few schools, and my mom wasn't ready to come with me yet, so I didn't really have a choice but to board somewhere, and that's where Vancouver Island came into the picture.
Yeah, interesting. So you kind of mentioned you studied at UBC, you studied economics, and then I guess immediately after graduating, you went to BCIT to complete the marketing program specializing in real estate, which is pretty well known here. What motivated you to take that program so soon after graduating university?
I actually didn't finish my degree at UBC. I spent about 2 years there focusing on economics and some of the other required courses. with the intent of getting into solder. My passion for real estate has been there lifelong. I knew that's where I wanted to go. It just wasn't entirely clear what path I would take to make it there. And so after spending 2 years at UBC, I just that sort of the system there wasn't for me the way that the learning happens. It just wasn't really for me. I'm more of a practical learner than I am a theoretical learner. And so at the time, I had met my best friend out at UBC, who introduced me a few to his closer friends that had already been in the real estate industry, some of which have gone through the BCIT real estate program. And so I got fortunate to go meet with them, and they really explained to me that, if you're looking to stay in Vancouver and you don't want to go, outside of British Columbia, BCIT is a great school. They have this, very specific real estate program. So I ended up interviewing with, or I ended up meeting with Bill Phillips, who used to be the former program head of the real estate program at BCIT. And I loved the way that he approached the education. He was very much, here's a task and go do it. It's very much go out there, be resourceful, meet the right people. And that's how you'll learn how to, become an expert in real estate. And so that suited my personality really well. And of course, there was some theoretical work involved, but for him, it was all about mimicking what the real world is like. And so I joined that program. It was 1 year of a sort of more general business curriculum, and then 1 year of all real estate. And that, involved acquisitions and development and getting prepped for your license and all that stuff. And it was a really great program, and ultimately helped me make my next step into the real estate industry.
You mentioned that you always had this feeling that real estate was kind of the path that you wanted to take. Again, like just to dig into that, like how did that come about for you? How did you know that?
Yeah, I have a bit of background in real estate through my family back home in Germany, and I've always had a passion for building things. And it's actually interesting because, you would think that if I have a passion for building things and seeing things turn from non-tangible to tangible into like a big project, it may be more of a development career for me. And of course, I spent most of my time at Bosa on acquisitions. But that was really it for me. I just liked seeing things come to fruition, building out of the ground and the complexities behind it, and even just the actual technicality of building a project, how the structure works. I thought that was all really fascinating. And then when I came to Vancouver, where you have a city of glass, how they sometimes call it, with a lot of the high-rise towers, it was like a whole nother dimension for me. It's not very common in Germany to have high-rise towers like we have here in Vancouver. So that was kind of the final push for me to say, hey, this is really what I want to do.
Fantastic. And you joined Bosa as a development intern, I believe, and then went on to spend close to 10 years with the group. So do you mind maybe touching on your career development at Bosa and the different roles that you held during that decade?
For sure. I had an interesting path to get into Bosa. Throughout my BCIT career, we had to do a business consulting project, which I'm now allowed to disclose. That was always a running joke within the BCIT program, that you have to, have confidentiality in place until you've completed the project, and then you can disclose it. And I think if Bill Phillips heard this interview, he'd probably laugh. But yeah, so I did my business consulting project for Bosa. I was really keen on starting my career there, so I felt that if I get an opportunity to work for them as an internship, I can showcase them my skills, and then hopefully have a good foot in the door. So that's where I started off. This was in 2012. And then as I wrapped up the BCIT real estate program, I started communicating with Bosa on sort of the sales and marketing side. And I said that, I do want to be in development as a coordinator. That's where I'd like to start my career. But really, to be in an organization as great as Bosa, I'll take any role and I'll work my way up. Right time, right place. I met Herman Nüssler at the time, who was the former VP of development, also a German fella. So I felt like I had a good connection with him, and he had a spot opening up for a development coordinator role. So that's where I started then in early 2013. For about 2 years, I worked with Herman in the development side of things, being a coordinator. I oversaw various projects, for example, the Burquitlam Uptown Towers with the Safeway on the bottom. I worked on Bosa's Sovereign project in Burnaby. But at the time, even though the company was already quite sizable, it was still very much a small team and a small team culture, which was a really great learning experience for me. So not only did I do development coordination work, I also worked on the leasing side of things. I worked on marketing sales for projects. I did some finance work. I got to work a lot with legal. And then as I started at the same time, a gentleman by the name of Michael Dayton started, who's Bosa's Vice President of Acquisitions now. And him and I spent a lot of time together as he needed help underwriting and analyzing new acquisitions. And so that's kind of the next part of my career. After about 2 years with Bosa, Colin Bosa actually suggested I should think about moving onto the acquisition side of things. And I figured if Colin says I should consider it, I should probably do it. And that was by far the best decision that I ever made in my life. It's not that I didn't like being a development coordinator, and at that point I was managing some projects. It was more so that it was, I think, lesser suited for my personality. I really like a fast-paced environment, a lot of turnover, deal volume, and of course, if you're a development coordinator or manager, or generally in the development part of the business, you're of course working on a project for a prolonged duration. That just it wasn't necessarily the best fit for me. So after 2 years, I made the switch and I became an acquisitions analyst with Michael Dayton, and he was sort of my next mentor to me, really savvy on the financial side, deal structuring. And that's where we really started just looking at a ton of new opportunities, a ton of new acquisitions. And that's where I really got my feet wet, on the acquisition side, learning the business.
Yeah, my next question actually was about what drew you to the acquisition side of the business, but you've kind of answered that. It just seemed to match your personality.
Yeah, and more so, I said earlier, I had a bit of a tough time growing up in school. Like language has never been my strong suit, but numbers have come really naturally to me. And so as I realized what part of the business is a really analytical, numbers-driven business, aka the acquisition side of the real estate business, I just knew there was a better fit for me. I really like the creativity that you can bring to the table on the acquisition side. It's not just about looking at a project and analyzing the numbers and saying, yes, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense. There's so many ways to structure a deal. There's so many ways to financially engineer a project that it makes great sense for an acquisition. And that's a really intriguing part of the process. And then the sort of so it's fast paced, it's the analytical side, and then the third aspect of my keen interest in acquisitions was really the strategy side of things. I think it starts with acquisitions to sit down and look at the macroeconomic indicators out there and say, what's going on in the world and how are we positioning ourselves for where we think the world is going, or what asset classes are we looking into based on the current environment, or how can we structure deals in various asset classes differently to generate some really lucrative deals. And that's again a very tangible part of the real estate process. You come up with a strategy, you execute on it. You have to be right because of course it can be very costly, but that's no different than development. And then you reap the benefits ideally of such a strategy.
David, just a follow-up question, if I may. So you touched on like there's interesting ways to structure a deal. So I think sometimes when we hear that phrase, unless you're maybe in the job and you kind of are living and breathing it, it's tough to perhaps appreciate what that means, the art of like structuring a deal and all that goes along with that. So is there maybe an example you can share just to bring to life, just what goes on in that deal structuring?
Yeah, absolutely. Deal structuring is really interesting because it allows you to kind of financially engineer a project. That's how I always like to describe it. And there's really a lot of methods to it. And there's no one right or wrong answer. At my time in Bosa, we looked at a lot of projects that we really thought had great, ability to be a good project, but the metrics weren't there. So one of the approaches Bosa always used to take is, of course, joint venture partnerships. And that's really an opportunity to get more into the detail of how the cash moves around, and you're not really paying for a site, or you're paying for the site at a later part of the development process, and that really all factors into the actual performance of the project. In today's environment, even more so, when we talk about structuring deals, we could look at the financing side of things, working with different lenders to get creative through interest-only financing, or being able to draw more money on a mortgage over time as your income increases. We've been looking at deals as of late where we're actually having the vendor top up the income to market so that we can get better financing. Vendor take-back mortgages is a very common sort of method to use. You can get really creative with this type of stuff, and it really depends on the situation in the deal that you're looking into. In today's environment, which I don't think I need to mention, is definitely an environment that's more challenging than the last decade has been. I believe that's what a lot of groups are doing that are out there buying new real estate. They're getting really creative on the structuring side to make sure that the financial returns work and they're not, exposing themselves to too much risk.
No, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, and we are recording this like mid-November 2023, and kind of transaction activity has been sluggish for several months. I mean, a couple of years maybe you could comment, but and that's due to a variety of factors, of course. But perhaps you can share your experience of working in acquisitions in like the late 2010s. Feels like maybe the heyday when you look back on it. But yeah, just maybe some anecdotes, like what was the world like then for someone in acquisitions?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the right word to describe it. It's back in the day, in the mid 2010s, the market was already accelerating, appreciating a lot and very fast. And so it was an extremely competitive environment. I remember as I started at Bosa in 2013-14, I was underwriting the Codero project that they were just starting to construct or complete, maybe, can't quite remember. And we were adding $25 per square foot in sales values by the week. That's what the market was like at the time, because there was so much demand out there and so much interest for good condo product. And what that really did to the market is it made it challenging for us to acquire real estate because it's so competitive out there. And of course, Bosa is in the business of acquiring predominantly multifamily and condo high-rise product. And so, having to underwrite a deal and doing due diligence in 45 to 60 days and close in 60 days, on the big acquisitions was pretty tough. We were fortunate that we had a really great team of three, Mike, Neil, Martin, and myself, and we really, we kind of divided and conquered, which was great. At the time, I'd like to say we pioneered a new strategy where we acquired older condominium units in strata buildings or in condominium buildings to try to assemble development sites. And we acquired, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 of those projects in Vancouver. So I think at a time, we were probably doing like 200-300 individual condo deals in a year or two. And that was great exposure, sitting, in a living room with the vendors and negotiating paper and purchase and sale contracts and really securing positions in these buildings and underwriting constantly and adjusting to the market and working through the due diligence. And that was a pretty crazy time. And then at the same time, of course, Bosa was acquiring industrial projects, which had started to catch a bit of wind as these lease rates started escalating. And so it was really fast pace. It was really important to be thoughtful and critical and make sure that we have a good process and system in the way that we analyze these deals, in the way we do our due diligence, and then in the way that we actually execute the acquisition. And we built a pretty great system out of it, which actually was an amazing learning experience for me.
Are you looking for a recruitment partner that understands your unique hiring needs and can truly represent your business to the market? When you work with Highview Partners, it will feel like an extension of your company. Our process is proven to help you find exceptional talent, which we accomplish by understanding your company's values and culture first. We then commit to a strategic plan, navigate any challenges, and find the candidate who fits the role and your company best. Together, we will help you build a winning team. To discover more about our services, contact us today or visit us at highviewpartners.ca.
So I guess if we're to maybe turn the page and talk about this new chapter of yours in 2022, you made a big change. You left Bosa to start up Astria with Josh. Yeah, what were the big drivers for you in wanting to do this? And if you can share, how did the partnership come about?
Bosa provided me with an amazing opportunity. They're a really great company with obviously a lot of runway. So it was tough for me to leave there, but I have been thinking about starting my own business or partnering with somebody to help them start a business for quite some time. I think the big driver behind it is that I'm big on trying. Like I need to have tried something, and if I fail at it, at least I can say I tried it. And so the way that I thought about it for myself was when I'm older and I look back and I didn't try to start a business, I would have considered that a failure for myself. So that was one component to it. And really the other component being is I had just spent 10 years with a great company. I got exposed to a lot within the business, acquisitions, development, marketing, sales, financing, strategy. And I just had thoughts about running my own business on how to do things myself and how to build a team, how to build a culture and all that. And so I decided to, I guess, approach the market quietly with the indication that, I'm either going to go off on my own or if I can find somebody who's willing to partner with me so I can help him grow his business, that would be a great segue or great path as well. And so again, right time, right place. Really, I had breakfast with a good friend of mine who's in the industry at Avis and Young, and I said to him, "Hey, look, like confidentially, I'm in the next year or two, I'm going to start thinking about what's next for me, for David." And so he said, "Hey, why don't you talk to Josh Gallardi from Orion Construction?" And Josh and I had already talked a little bit. He was doing a bit of work for us at the time, and I said, I've heard about Josh's growth trajectory. This was in 2021 now. So Josh is 3 years in building Orion Construction, who is a design builder, general contractor for industrial projects in Metro Vancouver, in the Lower Mainland, really, BC now. And I said, "Hey, that's super intriguing. I know they're on a great growth trajectory. They have a very specific business model, which I really liked, and they're starting to make a splash in the market." So this meeting or a lunch meeting was facilitated. Josh and I were formally introduced, and we had lunch for about an hour. We talked about what he's intending to do, what I'm intending to do, and that's where he mentioned to me that he had started a sister company to Orion Construction called Astria Properties, and Astria's objective is to be a development company in the local market, very similar to many of the other general contractor stores we hear in the market that, of course, have started growing on the construction side and then decide to also start development. And so we spent, just about an hour talking about Astria and talking about, where he sees future growth for Astria and where I see growth. And we sort of shared our interests in boutique projects. We shared our interests in the industrial world and growing a company, but with a small and nimble team and becoming a specialist really in a very specific field. And the rest is kind of history. And then we continued that conversation for several months before we had everything sort of figured out between us and what this would all look like before I made the move and came over to formally start up Astria Properties.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, as you say, right time, right place.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can just tell us again a little bit about Astria Properties. Like what is the vision? And what else can you share about the business?
Yeah, for sure. Our vision is, of course, to build a great organization and to grow in size, but our approach is through smaller projects. And so we have a very specific business model, and that is we only pursue industrial properties under 4 acres in size. Those can be income producing or development, but we always stick to the sub 4 acre industrial market. Josh started Astria Properties that way. He's got some great examples of projects just like that. Built to suit projects on 1.5 acres, 2 acres. We've got some speculative projects on 2 acres. And so as we refined this business model, we really realized there's a pretty sizable market for those types of opportunities. It's a really big addressable market For example, 33% of all industrial properties in Metro Vancouver are less than 5 acres in size. That actually includes infrastructure land as well as including airports and rail land. So if you took those properties out of the number, I bet you'd be closer to 50%, if not higher. So that means that's big addressable size for us, a lot of opportunities to look at acquisitions at properties. We've also noticed that there are very limited competitors in this space. Most of the industrial developers in Metro Vancouver focus on 5 acres plus. That's kind of the cutoff where they start achieving some economies of scale. And then the sort of last component to it is that there's a lot of owner users in this market, like a steel fabrication business. They want to own their own property. They want to be on their own piece of dirt. They don't want to share a wall with somebody. They need a specialized facility. And that's a market that we want to tap into more actively. Over the last 2 years, 3 years, we've completed 2 of those projects, one in Campbell Heights called Dr. Ma's Laboratory. It's about 35,000 square feet. And then the first project Astria ever completed was advanced material handling in Abbotsford. And then recently we landed the Canada Post built-to-suit mandate for a 32,000 square foot facility in Kelowna, which we're super excited about.
Running a company is a big change. So I guess curious, what have the biggest challenges or lessons been for you so far, David?
Focus is really, really important. I loved the way that my career evolved. I always considered myself sort of a Swiss Army knife. I worked in acquisitions to acquire hotel properties and office buildings and rental towers and industrial projects. And working on all those different deals and some really complex deals allowed me to build a really good skill set. But I wanted to boil that down into focus. And by focus, I mean we just want to focus on sub 4 acre industrial parcels in Metro Vancouver. We want to be achieving leadership within this space by knowing the product really well, by being the go-to developer group for the brokerage community, by being the go-to group for the build-to-suit clients that are out there. When somebody needs a new building, they need to find a site. We want to, of course, be mentioned, say, hey, you should talk to Astria. They really know this space well. And this was a really interesting part of my journey as I left Bosa to start up Astria. The minute you do that, you just start meeting a lot of new people and you get opened up to a lot of new opportunities. And we constantly see interesting acquisitions or interesting ways to invest in deals. And a lot of times we have to say no. And it's really important for us. And I actually have a really good example for this, which was a bit of a learning lesson. We acquired a project on the island in Colwood, which is a 2.5 acre site. And it's got a light industrial designation with a little bit of flex retail. And our intention was to build a light industrial project there. And it's a great property. It's got great exposure. It's in a great up and coming market. We ultimately felt that industrial is actually not the right product type for that location. So we pivoted to build retail, or we're going to build retail there. And it's a good example of what I talked about earlier as focus. I think we're going to do really well on this project. We have some great interest from national tenants. It's a really unique location and it's the right fit. But certainly retail isn't Astria's bread and butter. So we had to do a lot of learning on the design side, on how to negotiate leases, how to work with these tenants to come up with a good product. And it's been a big time suck for my team and myself. And that just speaks to the fact that we want to be in the sub 4 acre industrial space. So this project is a one-off. We're not going to do that again. It's a great asset, or it's going to become a great asset. But in the future, it's all about focus, and that's sub 4 acre industrial properties. And then one of the other challenges, because I think this is really important, is decision making. We have a fairly small team now, and so all the decision making generally funnels up to me, and I'm an expert in acquisitions, I think I can say, but there's a lot of other fields of this business that I'm involved in now that I'm still learning a lot about. And so, this real estate industry is really fast paced, so you can't really take too much time making decisions. And so it's about making good decisions and making them fast, but more importantly, having a plan in place on how to rectify if the decision wasn't correct. And that's just an ongoing sort of learning for me that I'm trying to get better in every day.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And David, how are you finding the market right now and looking ahead to next year? What are the main challenges and opportunities as you see them?
It's been an interesting time to leave a great stable company to start a startup, but we've managed to do okay. We've been very sort of vigilant on how we grow. The market is very challenging right now. We, of course, do light industrial. A lot of it is, small bay or strata product really, and there just isn't a whole lot of demand for industrial strata product in today's market as a result of where these interest rates have gone. So the logical option would be to try to pivot a project to lease. Now vacancies are starting to shoot up, and the numbers just don't pencil. So it's been a challenge out there. Not to say that we wouldn't look at an industrial strata project in the right location and for the right product type. We're still active in the market. For example, we would buy dock loading product near Port Kels because we feel that's one of the strongest industrial markets. There's some supply coming to the market, but that's where the owner users want to be. Outside of that, we've just kind of pivoted our strategy. So one of the asset classes within industrial that we're actively looking at is self-storage. That historically has been sort of a downturn resilient business. Those developments are really suitable for smaller sites, so that really works with our business model. We've been actively pursuing acquiring income producing properties, and this is really to add a backbone to the Astria organization to buy some stable cash flowing assets. And we do think that there is a pretty unique opportunity in that particular market, as the economy stabilizes over the next year and a half, these interest rates will start coming down again and we reach our inflation target. But Astria as a startup doesn't really have the luxury of pausing and sitting and waiting for the world to unfold, which is why we've been spending a great deal on strategy. How do we position ourselves? How do we keep growing? And that resulted in us looking more into the self-storage world, looking more into income producing properties, as we're just not seeing as much new opportunities on the strata industrial side.
You mentioned Port Kells. What's special about that area? What would you like about that area? Maybe for listeners that are not familiar.
Yeah, it's just a really central industrial market. I think over the past 2 or 3 years, it's really emerged as the premier industrial market in Metro Vancouver because of its accessibility right off Highway 1. You get to be in Coquitlam, you get to be in Burnaby in downtown relatively quickly from there. Alternatively, you can get out to Abbotsford in a pretty quick time frame. It is a pretty small pocket of industrial, although there's some new and upcoming industrial zones, lands just south of the highway. But we've just seen a lot of favoritism from owners to be in that particular market. So we continuously monitor that smaller pocket to see if there's more opportunities for us.
And you mentioned self-storage. I'm just going to give a little shout out. I spoke to Tracy McAvoy, who's the direct with Maple Leaf Self-Storage. This is going back a few months now, but if anyone wants to go back and listen to that episode, she's a real expert in putting those facilities together and running those businesses. Yeah, it's an interesting business, that's for sure. So I'm kind of turning the page again to chapter 3 here. So a big focus for, I should say, chapter 3 of this episode. A big focus for the Real Estate Careers podcast is to share advice with our listeners. So for anyone that's out there looking to get ahead in their careers. So David, you've worn lots of different hats in your career so far. And as you say, acquisitions has been a big focus for you. It's a job that requires you to be out there developing relationships, and oftentimes you're away from the office when you do this over lunches and things. So I'm curious, how did you go about learning the art of conducting these in-person meetings, coffees, lunches?
I've always been a big learning by doing person, and so early on in my career, I really focused on volume of meetings. But more importantly was the people that I met with. So I met with people that are in entry level positions all the way to C-suite, And the objective behind that was really to understand how they conduct meetings, how do the conversations evolve, what's of value to them as we're going through these meetings. And that really allowed me to sort of refine my process as I'm meeting with different individuals in the industry to make sure that the time that we're spending together, the information that we're exchanging is of really good use. And I think it's really important to be providing information in these types of meetings. These relationships are two-way streets, right? You're probably having a meeting with somebody to learn from someone, and that may be a very experienced person, and you may not have much to deliver at the onset of your career, but it's always worth a shot, right? Report on, hey, we just did a lease deal with this tenant, or this is what we're seeing in the construction industry, that type of stuff. It goes a really long way and facilitates a really nice conversation between the two people meeting.
And a follow-up to that, like what advice would you have for people in similar roles, let's say they're acquisitions analysts who are looking to improve in that area?
Yeah, the brokerage community is an acquisitions person's lifeline. I mean, that's where all the deals come from. So it's really, really important to establish strong relationships with the brokerage community. Now, if you're an entry-level analyst or you were in the business for a year or two, you likely won't get a call from the top producers at, Avison, Colliers, Cushman, CB, because they'll call likely your boss. And so it's really important to grow with the up and coming brokers who you have conviction in will do really well in the business. That's the strategy that I adopted when I started at Bosa. I spent, the greater part of 2 years actively meeting all the younger individuals, going for coffees and lunches with them, helping them with analysis, right? Providing them with feedback on how I would look at a project. Again, turning this relationship into a two-way street. It's not just about the broker bringing you a site. It's about you delivering information to the brokers so that you can help them be successful. And that goes as far as if I pass on a site, even today, I might even tell the broker, contact this person because they might be a great buyer for it. Those things go a really long way. So my advice is be really strategic about who you meet with the young up and comers and grow the relationship with them over time, and then be a provider of information to them that's useful for them to conduct their business.
And David, how important have industry associations been to your success? Like what are your favorite sort of events to attend and why?
I like the sit down panels and educational sessions because I consider them like super networking events, and might be pretty uncomfortable, but if you just sit yourself down at a table where you don't know anybody, you don't have a choice but to meet new people. And it's a really great way to network. You exchange business cards, you follow up with an email afterwards, you grab a coffee. It's a really, really good way to meet a lot of new people. And what I love about this industry is that everyone is always so willing to take time to meet, to go for coffee, to share insights, to provide advice. So, as I said, so specifically the sit down events where you're nearly forced to talk to somebody at a table, because it's a great way to get introduced to new people in the industry.
As you say, not always easy to do, especially when you're new in your career. But
we've all been there, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
People understand that.
Yeah, it's true. So looking back, what advice would you have for your younger self that you wish you'd been told?
It's got something to do with comfort. So I think as you progress in your career and you work for a great organization and you start to understand the business, it's easy to get comfortable. I think it's important to never let that happen, because if you're uncomfortable, it means you're stretching. And I'm not meaning you're stretching for a new acquisition, you're stretching for personal growth. What does that look like? You might have an idea or a strategy, and maybe you build a business plan on that strategy and you actually present it to the CEO of the company. That's really uncomfortable, and they might shoot you down, they may not shoot you down, but those types of actions, they don't go unnoticed within the company, and they really expose you to a lot of growth and a lot of opportunity within the company. And it also sort of highlights that you're forward thinking, you care about the business. So that would be my one advice. Try to put yourself into uncomfortable situations.
I think that's great. And as a leader of the business, or of a business, how do you go about building a culture, and what sort of workplace are you hoping to establish at Astria?
I'm a big believer in a collaborative work environment and to make collective decisions. I know ultimately, the final decision falls back on me, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And so I have the luxury of having a small team. There's 5 of us in total now at Astria, but incredibly hardworking, humble, and very bright team. And we do a lot of collective decision making and collaborative work. And the objective there really is that if we make a decision together, it makes my team feel really involved in the business. They're directly responsible for the growth of the company because we've all decided to make that one decision. That's really important for me. Again, so a collaborative sort of work environment and collective decision making. And then, we're in constant communication with each other. We have a really transparent work environment. At the end of each week, I usually sit down with the team and we chat about the successes of the week, highlight that everybody's done a great job. We're progressing. We like knocking things off our to-do list. I think it's a really great way to track we're making good progress, which is, one of our sort of Astria core principles is execute and not get hung up on certain things. That's very important to me. Again, to just make sure we're really close in the team and we're giving people within the organization the ability to make important decisions because ultimately that means they feel responsible for the organization as well.
And outside of work, where are you placing your energy if you have any left?
I have a 17-month-old son, and he is wild and crazy right now, but it's a lot of fun, and he's actually teaching me a lot about life. Unfortunately, with work and how busy he is, time does really fly. It's been almost 2 years already since he's born, so time goes by really fast. But that's where I place a lot of my energy and my time.
And then I guess just maybe getting to know you a little bit more, the favorite things to be doing outside of work and family, and how do your, when you can find the time, some of your extracurricular hobbies, interests add to your life?
Yeah, I try to find a bit of balance. I think it's really important. And, going back to your question previously on building a good culture, that's very important to me, is to ensure that we all have some form of balance. We're a small team for developing over 500,000 feet, 6 projects across British Columbia. It's a lot of work, but whenever I do find time, I like playing hockey and I like playing golf. I like taking my little guy hiking. He's 30 pounds now, so he acts like a weight vest, which is good when I put him in the carrier. That's really it. And I think it's important to, distract your mind a little bit from just work all the time. Get a reset, get a refresh. And then recently, I've been getting more and more into reading business books. I'm not much of a sort of fiction or novel reader, but I like business books. I like to learn about the concepts other organizations are applying to create a good culture, to create a good structure, to implement systems and processes. I'm just finishing up Good to Great by, I think it's Jim Collins, which is a really great book about, how some companies that used to be good went to being great. So a lot of good principles there. And then for anyone in the acquisitions business and really anyone involved in negotiations, I'm just about to finish up Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss is his name. And it's a really, really good negotiations book. So for anybody that's doing negotiations in the real estate industry, it's an amazing skill set or toolbox to tap into. He used to be the head negotiator for the FBI, and he sort of references his tactics with real life examples. So it's intense, but it's really insightful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, David, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for sharing. It's been super interesting. So I hope our listeners find it as insightful. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me. It was great to chat with you.
Thank you for listening to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers podcast brought to you by Highview Partners, a talent search and recruitment firm focused exclusively on Canadian real estate. If your real estate team is looking to find the best next hire, or if you're ready to make the best next move in your career, then reach out to Highview Partners today. Follow us on LinkedIn and visit us at highviewpartners.ca.